I like to start with this quote for our PR professionals from Bill Komkowicz, who writes for PR Daily. He says, linguistic skills are no longer enough. The profession is image focused. And he makes the point that job candidates with the basic knowledge of Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign can gain an advantage. And those are, of course, all parts of the Adobe Creative Cloud. So first of all, I want to kind of break down the word design. We don't think too much about it because we think we know what it is, but it's important that you understand that to design means to construct according to a plan. You want to think it through and deliberately arrange the elements or details in a product or work of art. And what that means is using some of the principles of design and really thinking in terms of a focal point and an eye path through the message that you are creating. I'm going to approach the lecture also from a little bit of a software-driven presentation by focusing for this week's projects on InDesign for editorial content, Photoshop for social media graphics, and Illustrator for vector art, primarily for logo design. I want to just talk a little bit about persuasion. Journalism and PR-related uses of visual communication diverge quite a bit when it comes to graphics, because graphics are used by journalists to convey and clarify information. That can also be true of PR graphics, but with public relations art, you're typically dropping persuasion into the mix. Informative and persuasive communication are really two different animals, and I'll try my best to wrangle in both. So let's start with editorial design, which is, by the way, something not only journalists but PR practitioners should understand. And in the optional resources for this week, you'll find a short video on important things to know about designing for editorial. And if that's your primary interest, I urge you to view that video. It's called Introduction to Editorial Design Principles in Magazine Design. Editorial design and other forms of page layout for print, which would include things like posters, flyers, infographics, and brochures, is frequently accomplished with Adobe InDesign. InDesign has both print and web design capabilities, and you'll find tutorials for using InDesign beneath the lecture video on the same module page. So online versions of editorial and news, though they are sometimes based in InDesign for the web, tend to use bespoke web platforms created specifically for a news organization. And those systems are going to change from job location to job location. Some of these are specific to online design and some are WordPress based. WordPress is the most commonly used site building software for developing websites today. It's free, open source software, and although I don't cover the software in this class, I recommend you check it out. It can also be effective for building your own website. It's been around for a long time and it's likely to continue being in existence forever, unlike some services like Squarespace or Wix. It also allows for more customization. What I'm going to cover regarding design, which includes PR projects like newsletters, posters, flyers, is the process of layout and compositional page design. And I'm using the term page throughout my lecture rather loosely as a generic term for anything that contains both image and text that gets integrated into one graphic communication. In a generic sense, a screen and an ad can also be a page in this context. For now, I'm just going to give you a crash course in display typography, that is, using fonts for minimal text like headlines, or the copy that might accompany a data visualization chart. Dealing with body copy is a whole other science, and if you intend to pursue editorial or informational design, you've got to educate yourself further. Typography really is a science as much as it is an art, and there are issues regarding readability that can ensure that your text is most effective. So each character in a display font, that's each letter form in type vocabulary, could be considered a work of art with unique characteristics and personality. You want to choose your fonts carefully and think about what they communicate. Is it sophistication, lightheartedness? Good graphic design matches the type style and your treatment of it to the meaning or message of your visual communication. So you want to know what your stylistic purpose is. Limit your use of fonts generally to no more than two, one for display type, another for body text. And then for variation, you can use different styles from the same family. Body text and display fonts are paired to work with contrast. You want to find pairings that set each other off but don't fight the eye for attention, that can harmonize without becoming dull. And the age-old rule goes similarity or contrast, but not conflict. Stay within the same structure, such as X height. So there are several guidelines you want to follow when laying out pages. You want to keep it simple, avoid clutter, create a hierarchy of information from the most to the least important. Make the most important information obvious by using larger typefaces, brighter colors, that sort of thing. You always have to respond to the edges of the format. You're typically working within a rectangular format, and be aware that that puts a frame around your message, and everything that you place on the page has a relationship to the straight edges of the vertical and horizontal frame. You want to acknowledge the midline, which means basically that you can go for a symmetrical balance, and every time you place something on the left side, you place an equal weighted object on the right side. Balance is very important, and it's a tricky thing. Sometimes you start adding in elements and you realize somewhere you've lost your balance. You've got to stop, move things around, and really achieve that sense of balance, whether it's symmetrical or asymmetrical. So you want to remember the principle of economy always. It's a bad thing if you have a conflicting jumble of graphic images that causes overload, leaves us confused by chaos, and your eyes find it hard to focus on any one thing. One of the things with page design that's important, particularly if you're kind of designing on the fly based on something like the rule of thirds, you want to be sure to design from the inside out. When you're working with spreads, page spreads, for instance, in a booklet or a magazine layout, you want to avoid what's called trapped white space. That's negative space that kind of makes a hole in the middle of your design. That's going to get the most attention. Space is just very, very dynamic. When something's not filled in with objects, our eye goes to that position because it creates a shape. When you have things clustered and then one thing off by itself, surrounded by negative space, that's going to draw your eye to it. So that's enough about page layout. We'll move on to something a little simpler. Small text and image graphics, for instance, to accompany social media announcements or to include as part of an online news article in the form of visual data. So this genre of graphic communication is simpler than page design, but issues such as visual hierarchy, unity, balance, contrast, focal point, eye path economy all still apply. So I'm going to address specifically graphics produced for social media. Most social media and simple web-housed graphics utilize Photoshop for creation. Photoshop has a lot of type capabilities that you should explore. It's the most commonly used software for social media graphics. So in a social media graphic, you're kind of doing a tiny ad, something that can be read on a phone, and it's best to keep copy to a minimum. You want to use short headlines and no more than an attention-getting phrase for your body copy, maybe a website or a phone number. You typically want to have an eye-catching photo or illustration in the background. Illustration is often accomplished in Adobe Illustrator, where you can provide more uses for the same image with just very quick click changes. So I'm going to conclude now talking about vector illustration and designing images where you want to use a graphic that you've created for more than one application. Those are best laid out in vector. That means Adobe Illustrator. So something like a logo that gets used from business cards to the sides of buildings, from the size of a postage stamp to the size of a ship, are going to require vector illustration, because as you enlarge it, it keeps its fidelity. The computer basically redraws it at the different sizes, and you can also go in and make a lot of changes so that you can use the same piece of artwork in many different ways. So they're ideal for a company logo. Bezier curves are used to model smooth arcs that can be scaled indefinitely. And then paths are going to link the curves together as you draw typically with a pen tool. So here's an example of, on the left, what you see when you're drawing a path. You're creating objects that you stack on top of each other, shapes that become then objects within a scene. And then on the right, you can see where it was filled in with color, some of it transparent, some of it in gradient, but that's typical of what you see when you're working in Illustrator. You work back and forth from the drawn paths on the left to the appearance on the right once you put in your fill and what the final piece is going to look like. And it takes a long time to get really good at it. It's not an easy program to use, but very important to know how to use if you're going to be doing any kind of projects where you have to use the same illustration many times in different sizes. I hope you have fun with your graphics this week. Basically, you are creating a series in any format. You've just got to have 3 components. It can be a social media graphic that you do 3 different ways, or 3 different messages. It can be a magazine article with your own photography and sidebars, side articles. It can be a logo with business card and letterhead. You've just got to have 3 components. Read through the guidelines for the design activity this week and contact me if you have any questions.